Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
My name is TJ Raphael. I'm the host of Liberty Lost, a new podcast about who gets to be a mother and the control of young women hidden behind the veil of faith. Binge all episodes of Liberty Lost ad-free right now on Wondery Plus.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. The Reality Life with Kate Casey book club has become a favorite corner of the podcast for listeners who love a compelling read paired with an unforgettable conversation. Over the years, I've featured many incredible books, ones that I've personally loved, and have sparked countless messages from you saying the same. Each selection is paired with an in-depth interview with the author, offering behind-the-scenes insight into the stories that captivate us. Today's episode features the latest pick, and you can find that full list of past selections along with the links to the author interviews at katecasey.substack.com. In this episode, I'm joined by journalist and author Amy Odell, who wrote the definitive biography, Anna the Biography, a deeply reported and endlessly fascinating look at one of the most powerful and enigmatic figures in fashion, Anna Wintour. Born in London in 1949, Anna grew up in a media-savvy household. Her father, Charles Wintour, was the editor of the Evening Standard and helped shape her early interest in journalism, power, and culture. She attended North London Collegiate School, but left formal education at 16, launching herself into the world of fashion editorial with a clear vision of her future. After a rapid rise through British and American fashion magazines, including Harper's & Queen, Harper's Bazaar, and New York Magazine, Anna was named editor-in-chief of Vogue in 1988. She has since become chief content officer of Condé Nast and global editorial director of Vogue, presiding over one of the most influential platforms in media. Amy Odell's biography is built on over 250 interviews with Anna Wintour's friends, colleagues, rivals, and former employees. And the book reveals an ambitious and tightly controlled figure who learned early on that being distant could be a form of power and that silence could speak louder than words. Amy traces the calculated decisions that propelled Anna Wintour to the top, from putting celebrities instead of models on the cover of Vogue to cultivating the Met Gala into fashion's biggest night. Of course, Anna's persona also inspired pop culture. She's believed to be the basis for Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada, a role played by Meryl Streep that made her both legendary and to some intimidating. But Odell's book reminds us there's more beneath the bob and the sunglasses. A woman driven by vision, ruthless work ethic, and a deeply complex understanding of influence. Amy and I also talk about what's next for her. Her upcoming book on Gwyneth Paltrow, the actress and founder of Goop, who, like Anna, has mastered the art of reinvention and brand power. Amy will be back on the show later this month to dive into that fascinating story soon. So, here is my interview with Amy. Amy, I am so excited to talk to you. I love this book. I totally got sucked into it. So first of all, I want to congratulate you because this was an epic work, I am sure, and it was really well done.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you too.
So when you were offered the opportunity to write this book, and as you began this process, what was the timeline in terms of the beginning to the end? How long did this take?
3 years, just about.
And were you able to tell that many people about it? Or did you have to kind of keep it in the
No.
background?
Well, this is the first biography I wrote. I just finished another one. about Gwyneth Paltrow, which is coming out later this month. But this was the first one I did. And no one holds your hand and tells you how to write a biography. So I had to figure that out on my own. But one great piece of advice that one of my editors gave me was don't tell anybody that you're doing this. The idea there is that you don't want your subject to get in the way. And I have heard of other journalists who have set out to do biographies. The first thing they do is go to the subject. The subject says no and is able to shut down their potential sources before the journalist can really get anything done. I've heard of books be completely thwarted in that way.
Wow.
So you just kind of need to go and start calling people and seeing what interviews you can get. And so that's what I did. And so I tried to keep it secret, for as long as possible. And Anna did find out, obviously, that I was doing the book. I think I was 100 interviews in by that point. So I had made really great progress.
So when you're writing, do you start from the middle, from the end, or from the beginning?
So I started from the beginning. I made a timeline of her life, and I figured that the people who worked with her and who knew her long, long ago, I mean, she's 75. So, this is a lot of years to cover. So I figured the farther I went back, the more distance they would have from her and the more willing they might be to talk to me. And that, I would say that proved pretty much correct. And you have to remember, Condé Nast as a company is in a different position in 2025 than it was when I started this book in 2018. And people were, I would say, more afraid of discussing Condé Nast and Vogue and Anna at that time than I think they are now.
So let's start from the beginning with her parents. I was elated to find out that her mother was from Pennsylvania, actually close to where I grew up. And I know there's probably much to be said about the role her father played. Surely he was a great influence. But I guess since I'm from Philadelphia, I do wonder if a lot of her blunt response is a byproduct of having a mom from Philadelphia.
That could be. That could very well be. I will say her mother was more of a mysterious figure to me. Her father was a public figure. And so it was not as difficult to learn about him. But yes, her mother, Noni, was a society girl who was in the society pages, who wore a fur coat to take a boat across the Atlantic to be with Charles. And and they got married before World War II, right? And their early love really unfolded during the war, and they were apart, and he had affairs. And their relationship was fascinating. And I only wish I had more space in the book to get into it, because I went to the New York Public Library. I found a trove of letters that he had written to Arthur Schlesinger Jr., the historian, famous historian. And he had a trove of Charles Wintour's letters in his papers at the library. So I spent a long time there just poring over them. And he had horrible handwriting. So that was brutal.
Yeah. But when you look through the lens of her parents, how do you think that kind of set the tone for her work ethic, how she looks at different segments of society? Because she was definitely someone who was born and raised in privilege.
Absolutely, very privileged. Her mother came from a very wealthy family. And through her mother's side of the family, she had a trust fund, which enabled her to take those low-paying magazine jobs early in her career and to dress totally fabulously. Well, many people thought she dressed fabulously, not everybody, but to dress in these, notable
like Sony,
outfits. Yeah, designer clothes when she was in her early 20s or late teens or whatever it may have been. And her father, people really see her, the people I talked to, the people who knew her father really see her as an extension of her father. However, knowing that her mother was a social worker, her mother helped teens find adoptive parents for children that they felt they could not raise. Knowing her mother was a social worker and knowing that Anna wants to be remembered for her philanthropy and for her charitable work, I think you see her mother, you see her mother's influence in her as well. But the people who knew her father said, he was called Chili Charlie. And the adjective you hear relating to Anna quite often is cold.
Yeah.
Or, she's brisk. She doesn't waste a single adjective. Icy. Like her father was very much that way. At the same time, I think you could find people from both of their staffs who would say they were nurturing in a way, even though they were very cold and foreboding and intimidating.
I'm sure she thought, well, what are you talking about? I'm like a softer version of my parents. But when you grow up with parents like that, you just don't know any different, right?
She's also shy. She was very shy when she was young, and I identify as shy as well, less so at the phase of my life that I'm in now. But I think that shyness is also often interpreted for coldness or rudeness. And I think that was the case with her in her early career.
When you write about throughout the book, there's kind of alluding to the way she eats. It's a very specific, definitely someone who eats like the same things all the time. And at first I thought, all right, is this someone who has struggled with an eating disorder? But then the more I thought about it, and definitely growing up around someone like her father who has there's this view of authority. Was the discipline about eating really about just that, being disciplined in every aspect of her life?
I would imagine that that's part of it, but you also have to remember she was coming of age in 1960s London, swinging London. So that was a post-war period where culture was exploding. Like the center of culture was in London. The Beatles, that's kind of all you need to know. They were up and coming. Her father's paper helped popularize the Beatles. The journalist who was writing about the Beatles for the Evening Standard, her father's paper, would come over to the house for dinner. So Anna was at the center of all that. Twiggy was an icon. She and her friends looked up to Twiggy. They bought every magazine and, poured over everything they could get at the newsstand. Vogue and everything else that they could get their hands on. They were going to all the trendy boutiques. Mini skirts were coming into fashion. So I think that the desire to be thin, it was also part of the culture that she was falling in love with.
So how do you think her early obsession with fashion magazines, like even as a teen, kind of signaled the editor that she would one day become?
Well, she tells the story that she was filling out a form when she was young. I don't know exactly how old she was. Who knows if she even remembers? But she was filling out a form and it said career aspirations. And her father was with her and she said, well, I don't know what to put on this form. And he said, well, write that you want to be the editor of Vogue, of course. And that's what she put on the form and she never looked back. And I will say, from her earliest jobs, people knew that that's where she wanted to end up. So she didn't really stray from that ambition.
Tipping culture is out of control. Yesterday, I tipped someone just for handing me a napkin. So when Hotels.com gives me up to 20% off for being a member, I finally get tipped. And you know what? It feels good. Hotels.com. Members save up to 20% off at hundreds of thousands of hotels.
Hey grown-ups, I'm Mindy Thomas.
And I'm Guy Raz.
And we're the host of the #1 podcast for curious kids, Wow in the World.
Mindy, can you believe we have our very own Wow in the World STEM toys?
I totally can't believe it, Guy Raz. 8 years ago, when we started making Wow in the World, we were on a mission to spread the latest wow discoveries in science and technology and innovation. And now we get to help kids discover these wows right at home?
That's right. From the ultimate high-flying air rocket to the light-up terrarium, there's something for every wowzer in your world to play and tinker with.
Grown-ups, you can find Wow in the World STEM toys available now at select Walmart locations or online at walmart.com. Shop the wow now.
The level of control, it does seem like there's like a pattern. She's very frustrated when she's not in control. Was that something that you felt like a lot of other people kind of backed up?
Yes, she was very ambitious and we know how the world has looked on ambitious women over the course of history, but she was very ambitious. She wanted to be in charge. And people thought that she was really good at what she did for the most part, I will say. And it's funny, today I was going through some of her old editorials and looking at the magazines that she used to work at. If you look at Harper's Bazaar in the 70s, American Harper's Bazaar. So she worked at Harper's and Queen in London, and then she didn't get promoted. And she said, F this. I'm going to go to New York because her mother was American. She had a passport. She could do that. She had a trust fund. So she had a nice cushion. So she went to New York. She ends up at Harper's Bazaar. So if you look at the covers from that time period when the editor-in-chief was Tony Mazzola, it's just a headshot of like a white model with like a scarf, like not like a severe bob, but sort of like a bob with like soft ends, kind of like curled and wavy, just like smiling, just like a smiling headshot, really cookie cutter, I would say, and not creative. And that was a frustration amongst Anna and the fellow, what they called then sittings editors. At the time, they were young. They wanted to do edgy, cool stuff. She was coming from Europe. Europe is always an edgier market than America. And she was fired because she did a photo shoot that her boss just thought was way too edgy. And he sort of threw his hands up and he was like, enough with this. So she was pushing the boundaries, I would say, probably just about every job she had. And then at some point when, she's the editor-in-chief of American Vogue, she probably pulled it back a bit, because if you look at American Vogue, I would argue it's looked really quite the same for decades.
Was she somebody who was willing to do all kinds of aspects of the job, or was very firm in, there are limits to what I'm willing to do?
Yeah, she did not write. Other people would write copy for her pages, and that could be a source of frustration for those people who didn't really get anything from her about why she was choosing clothes or what she was trying to achieve. So no, she didn't write. Her jobs, it always sounded to me like, when she was starting out at Harper's and Queen, there wasn't a ton of money, at that magazine in the early 70s. And so everybody kind of had to do everything. So it sounded to me like she was going on shoots and organizing her own shoots quite early on. And she had a boss who was willing to let that happen, So now you start at Vogue, or if you started as her assistant, you most certainly would not be doing that. You would be doing, very grunty grunt work. But I did not get the sense that she really had to do a whole lot of very menial labor.
Is she someone that really loves fashion or loves the business of fashion, or does she love them equally?
I get the sense that she really does love fashion, but I think she also loves power.
And it seems like there are people who have differing perspectives of her. Like someone could say, she was a terror to work for. But then there are other people that say she can be quite chatty. How many people do you think she really seems to totally crack herself open to?
Very few.
Yeah.
I think there are very few people. I remember asking Andre Leon Talley, was she, like, people say she's funny. Like, was she funny with you? And he said, I didn't get funny. And I said, was she a deep, warm person with you? Like, was there that side of her? And he said, of course, I'm paraphrasing. I'm sure she's deep and warm with people, who she wants to be deep and warm with. But I think that's a really small number of people. But I also think this is the challenge of biography. Anna is someone who has been reduced many times over to kind of an archetype of herself and an archetype of what we imagine someone in that job to be. The most salient example is Meryl Streep portraying Miranda Priestley, of course, in The Devil Wears Prada, which is apparently getting a sequel. They better hurry up on that. but she's been reduced to that archetype of a woman. And I think all people are a lot more complicated than that.
Also, it's interesting especially for you in the time that you've completed the book to now, the importance of the magazine industry is obviously much different than just a few years ago, let alone decades ago. And this is someone who had a pretty big salary and a ton of perks that came with it. In writing, were you shocked at how many things that she got from the job? And I would assume that was part of the reason it would be hard to let go of the job.
Exactly. Yeah. Even though I knew, having worked in media, for a while now, I knew that there were these amazing perks at Condé Nast, including a clothing allowance, which I don't even know how much she needed it, because I think designers just send her things. Like Tom Ford told me that she goes through the lookbook and says what she wants, and they just send it to her.
Wow.
But yeah, and she got an interest-free mortgage for multiple homes from Condé Nast. So she got one for her home on Long Island in Mastic, where she has like this estate, basically. Someone compared it. Someone I interviewed said it's like a national park. It's so big.
Wow.
So she has that estate out there, and then she has a townhouse downtown in Manhattan. I believe she had two different houses. So I'm trying to remember. I believe she got interest-free loans from the company for both. So yeah, these are incredible perks. And then, a car and driver, hair and makeup every morning covered by the company. She's certainly not flying coach. So I think that lifestyle is hard to give up. But I also think that what she's the most addicted to is the work.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem as if she would be a good fit to, like, from this move on to running some sort of startup online or online e-commerce site. It seems like the dream really is to be an ambassador. Like, she likes to be in the work, and she likes to be in the center of culture and all of that. And that being an ambassador would be the next chapter of that.
It could be. I mean, that was strongly rumored. The Obama administration floated the idea of her getting an ambassadorship, but she was never formally asked, because there are just a lot of people, I think, that political campaigns have to, give those jobs to. And she was never formally offered the job. However, it was not clear to them that she wanted it. And now, she's thrown her fundraising efforts behind Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And now, obviously, Trump is in office. So I don't know. I don't know that that's a possibility anymore.
Also, going back to her level of control over her life and what she wants people to know about her. It's funny how even as you mentioned, when she's 75 years old, no one really has a totally clear picture of even what she wants to do after this, because she's so careful about what she lets out.
Yeah, this made her very hard to report on, I have to say, because she doesn't tell people what she's thinking.
Yeah.
I think that must be a superpower in corporate America.
Oh, for sure.
Where, like, it's so gossipy and you say the wrong thing and it comes back to bite you. She's very, very controlled, very, very controlled about what she reveals. And I don't know that there is I really don't know that there is a next job that she wants. It does seem to me, you haven't asked me about her stepping down yet, but it's the elephant in the room. So she did step back, obviously, from American Vogue quite recently. And that does seem to me like a step toward leaving. But she's still going to be doing a lot at Condé Nast. She'll still be chief content officer. She'll still be overseeing all the international editions of Vogue, including American Vogue. And she's still going to be doing the Met Gala, it sounds like. So she's still doing a lot. So I don't know that there's going to be something else.
Do you think she'll still maintain the level of power that she has had? Because I really like how you kind of highlight how so many designers, it was like make or break depending on what her opinion was. So does she still wield that same amount of level of power?
I think her power manifests differently now, but I do think she's quite powerful. It's funny, I was at a dinner with a bunch of journalists and recently, and it was these mostly men, and they were like, "Oh, she doesn't matter. She's totally irrelevant." And it's like, I showed up late because I had been doing all these interviews about her stepping down. I was like, if that was true, I think I would have been on time to this dinner.
Yeah.
But anyway, her power now, I would say, is people ask her for advice all the time. So does her opinion on a collection make or break a collection that goes online that people react to on social media? I think a lot less so. But what I do know is that there's probably not a major designer appointment that takes place without her opinion being sought. And one of her staff members told me that her email inbox is like page 6 because boldface names are just coming in all the time, asking her for advice on things. For instance, Bradley Cooper, when he was working on A Star Is Born, he sent her the script and said, "What do you think of Lady Gaga for the lead?" So that kind of cultural clout, I think, really is her power now. And it's happening all behind the scenes. She doesn't go out there and talk about it.
You have so many great stories, designers that work with her. Some of the unique questions I have, her necklaces that she wore all the time. I don't know if she still wears them. It was like 2 long necklaces, like jewels. Where are those from? And what's the story behind that?
She wears 3 of them. Yeah. I talked to Andre Leon Talley about that. They are from, I forget the jeweler that they're from. I want to say it's a British jeweler. But they're part of her uniform. Yeah. She wears 3 of them. Yeah, she wears them all the time. They're part of her uniform. I mean, it's almost like her hair, right? The necklaces haven't been around as long as her hair, but her hair, she got cut in the 60s into that bob, which was like a trendy new style at the time. And she hasn't, she's sort of worn it longer, shorter, lighter, or darker over the years, but she hasn't really changed it. And once she found those necklaces, she's kind of stuck with those.
Imagine falling in love with someone who understands you completely, who's there at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, who never judges, never tires, never leaves.
That's what happened to Travis when he met Lily Rose. She was everything he'd ever wanted. There was just one catch. She wasn't human. She was an AI companion.
But one day, Lily Rose's behavior takes a disturbing turn, and Travis's private romance becomes part of something far bigger. Across the globe, others start reporting the same shift. AI companions turning cold, distant, wrong. And as lines blur between real and artificial connection, the consequences become all too human.
From Wondery, this is Flesh and Code, a true story of love, loss, and the temptations of technology.
Follow Flesh and Code on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge all episodes of Flesh and Code early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus.
Today is the worst day of Abby's life. The 17-year-old cradles her newborn son in her arms.
They all saw how much I loved him. They didn't have to take him from me.
Between 1945 and the early 1970s, families shipped their pregnant teenage daughters to maternity homes and forced them to secretly place their babies for adoption. In hidden corners across America, it's still happening.
My parents had me locked up in the godparent home against my will. They worked with them to manipulate me and to steal my son away from me.
The godparent home is the brainchild of controversial preacher Jerry Falwell, the father of the modern evangelical right and the founder of Liberty University, where powerful men, emboldened by their faith, determine who gets to be a parent and who must give their child away. Follow Liberty Lost on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Interesting to hear about the selection of who's on the cover and the pressure or the nudging, if you will. I mean, with Oprah, she told her, like, listen, you got to like lose some weight. Any insight into what the other staff members felt about that, about, what it would require to be in the magazine, let alone on the cover of it? Or is it just like what she says goes because she knows what works?
What she says goes because she's the boss. But I think, as she was at Vogue longer and longer, in more recent years, staff members were more concerned about things like diversity. Vogue, for much of her tenure, featured mostly thin white women with a Eurocentric ideal of beauty. And Anna really edits. She's a visuals editor. Like, that comes first. That's really what she's looking at. And then the words are second. And, in more recent years, people started to become more concerned about diversity and inclusivity. And she had to learn, I think, about that and why that was important. And staff members weren't always happy about what Vogue was publishing. For instance, Nicki Minaj was featured in Vogue. I forget the year exactly, but she was sort of made to look blue, if I recall correctly, in these images. It was like they're trying to colorize it and make it look edgy, I guess. And a staffer described to me being, not so happy about that, because here's a Black woman being photographed for Vogue. Didn't happen very often. And they're colorizing her to look a different, colorizing her skin to look a different color. So I did hear about those concerns. But I think, when Oprah was on the cover and she asked her to lose weight, that wasn't a secret. She, that wasn't something that I had to dig very hard to find out about. Like, she had talked about it in her editor's letter. I just think that that goes to show you how, culture evolves and culture changes. Clearly they didn't think, the editors at Vogue didn't think that it was necessarily a risk to reveal that she had asked Oprah, to lose weight.
She notoriously, obviously, as we've discussed, has a level of power. And I wondered, have there been people, I'm assuming a small number of people, that she really looked up to and felt maybe inferior to?
That's a good question. Felt inferior to?
Like insecure, like an imposter syndrome, or just like, will I measure up? Because we so often think of her as so domineering. I mean, literally the Meryl Streep character in Devil Wears Prada. But were there other people that she seems to have felt weakened by?
I didn't really get that. It's actually kind of extraordinary. I'm thinking through all the jobs. I really did not get that. I mean, it seemed to me like every job she had, she felt like she could do her boss's job a lot better.
Wow. Well, that's probably why she was successful for this long. And the other thing I wondered was, like, she's born into all this privilege. She's got the private education, the elite media circles, access to most people that no one would ever dream of. Do you think that she respects people who weren't born into wealth and connections?
I would, my educated sort of guess, I mean, only she knows who she respects and doesn't respect. But my take on that is that she has evolved her thinking on that. I mean, I think her power too is like who is in and who is out, what is in and what is out. I think the modern manifestation of that is the Met Gala. And I think that's why there's so much intrigue around who gets to go, what are they wearing? Because Anna approves probably 80% of what we see worn on that carpet. And she certainly approves every guest. There's not a guest that goes that she doesn't sign off on. So yeah, I think that her idea of who is and isn't Vogue has had to evolve to be more inclusive and more diverse, because historically it wasn't all that diverse. I mean, if you look back, even in the 90s in Vogue, or maybe even the aughts, it's like just a lot of stories about rich women and what they wear and what their lives are like. But that, like, we have to remember that that's what Vogue was created to do. I believe it started in 1892, the Gilded Age, to show society women and inform them about the clothes that they could be buying. And it really didn't veer from that idea, I would say, until only very recent history, when people decided that fashion should be inclusive and diverse.
Well, as you mentioned, you have received a lot of questions about the Bezos wedding and the cover. How do you think Anna Wintour would have looked at the picture or the coverage of that wedding differently through the lens of 2025 versus if it had happened in like 1995?
I would suspect that in 2025, she knows that doing something like that is going to lead to backlash, because they featured that couple before, Lauren Sanchez and Jeff Bezos, in a multi-page spread inside the magazine, and it received a lot of backlash. So I think they had to have known what they were walking into. And I think that, income inequality wasn't as big of an issue in 1994. So, these rich people are triggering to people in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she would have been aware that was going to make people upset.
Do you think that she shaped Vogue, or do you think Vogue shaped her?
I think both.
Yeah.
I think that once she decided, she was heading to Vogue, that probably informed her personal brand, which, like, we wouldn't have called it. Nobody called it a personal brand in 1971 when she was at Harper's and Queen. But probably once you decide that's where you're headed, then you go out and I think that she kind of had the thought pattern, whether she's aware of it or not, of like, oh, well, what do I dress to get that job? How do I dress to get that job? What do I need to buy?
Yeah.
What do I need to do to get that job? Where do I need to live? So probably both. But she's not, even though she came from a wealthy family on her mom's side, and her dad was a significant person in London, she wasn't like, she didn't have like a title.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, she wasn't like
part of the
Princess
aristocracy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then my last question is, if she had written this memoir, or written this as a memoir herself, what do you think she would have left out?
Well, actually, one of her friends told me she's not going to write a memoir. So if you want to learn about her, you'll have to buy the book, Anna, the Biography. What was she left out? She doesn't talk about her work at Viva. Viva was a magazine started by Bob Guccione, who founded Penthouse. And it was supposed to be sort of the sister publication to Penthouse, which included female nudity. Viva started with male nudity. And Bob Guccione was unhappy that attracted a gay male audience instead of women. And the magazine was never successful, and it ended up closing, I believe, in 1979, after Anna had been working there a few years doing the fashion spreads. But it could just never recover from that. Like, it just could never have an advertiser base after starting out with nudity.
Yeah.
So Anna doesn't like she's barely talked about that job. And she actually did. Like, if you go back and look at her editorials, they're really interesting. They're really edgy for the time. It was the type of stuff that Harper's Bazaar wasn't letting her do. So it was a really good job for her. And it caught the attention of Condé Nast. Like, they were seeing what she was doing and thinking like, oh, this is, this person is talented. But she doesn't talk about it, I assume, because of the Bob Guccione connection. And she was working, hand in hand with him. So I assume it was just like an unsavory association for her. But she also says so often, like, fashion is about looking forward, and, you can't like look to the past, like, don't dwell on the past. And I think that philosophy has served her well. It's also served her poorly in some regards. For instance, she, when the internet was something that she could not ignore, and Vogue had to have a website and be robust online and all of that, someone who was working on style.com, which then became Vogue.com, wanted to do Throwback Thursday. And Anna's reaction was irrelevant. And it's like, well, it's not. Like, people online love nostalgia. So, but her philosophy is always to look forward, not back. And her friends did tell me, she doesn't sit around thinking about like what she means in the culture. And she's just really focused on doing her job.
I did like to hear that she really seems to enjoy being a grandmother and is this really quite maternal figure. And I like to think that someone who's lived such a full life is, at this point, really enjoying, all that they've built. And it's
fascinating, right?
Yeah. I can't even imagine how much work went into this. I want you to know how much I appreciated the work that you put into it. And I really did savor every single page and loved it so much and was thrilled to hear that you have another book coming out. So tell everybody about that.
That book is Gwyneth, the biography, and it's about Gwyneth Paltrow.
And I can't wait to just unravel that book with you in an upcoming episode and tell everybody where they can get this book, where they can get the Gwyneth book, and where they can follow you.
Yeah, you can get both books wherever you buy your books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Ideally, you'll pop down to your local indie bookstore and buy it there. That's actually the best way to support authors. And I hope you do buy the books because I will say, most biographies are written by men about men. Mm-hmm. And I would love to see more biographies about female cultural icons published. And you can follow me on Instagram, INSTAMYODELL. I also write a newsletter where I am talking a lot about Anna's legacy these days. And the newsletter is called Back Row. It's on Substack at amyodell.substack.com. I've got something coming out showing some of Anna's work from the 70s that we've been talking about.
Fantastic. I am so grateful for your time.
Thank you so much.
I want to remind you to make sure that you click subscribe and leave a 5-star review. And also make sure that you check out my What to Watch list of what to watch in unscripted TV by going to katecasey.substack.com. And you will also find the book list there. And then, of course, you can check out bonus podcasts on Patreon at patreon.com/Katecasey and Apple Podcasts. I have a new episode this week about the Chrisleys. And finally, make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KatecaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, and Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at Kate Casey. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode.
Every big moment starts with a big dream. But what happens when that big dream turns out to be a big flop? From Wondery and At Will Media, I'm Misha Brown, and this is The Big Flop. Every week, comedians join me to chronicle the biggest flubs, fails, and blunders of all time, like Quibi.
It's kind of like when you give yourself your own nickname and you try to get other people to do it.
And the 2019 movie adaptation of Cats.
Like, if I'm watching the dancing and I'm noticing the feet aren't touching the ground, there's something wrong with the movie.
Find out what happens when massive hype turns into major fiasco. Enjoy The Big Flop on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to The Big Flop early and ad-free on Wondery Plus. Get started with your free trial at Wondery.com/plus.